Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today at March's GMC March membership meeting. My name is Dave Anderson. I'm the new board chair of the Greater Milwaukee Committee. I'd like to welcome new GMC members today. Scott Lindvall should be here somewhere. There he is. Thank you for coming. Teresa Mogensen. I didn't see. There she is. Teresa, how are you? Ben Rickers. Ben, it's over here. Please welcome 3 of our new members to the Greater Milwaukee Committee. We look forward to getting to know each of you better and including your perspectives and leadership in our work. So today is my first board meeting as board chair. Thank you for all the members who came up to me and said, this is the podium. This is where you will speak from. So John Daniels, thank you for that. Appreciate it. I thought I'd maybe share just a little bit about myself. So I've been with M&I and BMO for about 30 years. In 1994, I came to Milwaukee. I'm not starting over. I know what you're doing. Milwaukee in 1994 was a completely different place then than it is today. We were fortunate enough to raise 3 great kids. The only person I knew in Milwaukee at the time is my wife, Wendy. And I can tell you now, 30 years later, I've met so many great people. I've served on so many great boards. And I often say this. Heather, did you want to take over? I often say this. Milwaukee has a great lake, and that certainly attracts a lot of people to Milwaukee. But it's because of people like you and people all over Milwaukee that actually keep people here and do the good work of Milwaukee. So I'm excited to take the helm of Greater Milwaukee Committee. We've done a lot over the last couple of years. We continue to do a lot more in the areas of fiscal strength, education, public safety, and infrastructure. And together with you all, I'm excited to lead the next chapter of the Greater Milwaukee Committee. So enough about me here for a minute. Today we've gathered to discuss the K-12 landscape in Milwaukee. There are many factors that shape educational outcomes, including leadership and governance at the state level, that influence what happens locally. On April 1st, we'll be tasked with voting for Wisconsin State Superintendent. Joel Brennan invited both candidates to present their platform to membership at today's meeting. Unfortunately, the incumbent candidate, Superintendent Jill Underly, was not able to make it. We hope to be able to send a message on her behalf to all of membership soon. However, we are joined by candidate Brittany Kinzer, who will share a few words about her interest in the position. Please welcome Brittany Kinzer.
Okay. I heard I had 5 minutes and then I get the hook, right? Well, okay, so I'm Brittany Kinzer. Thank you for warmly welcoming me today. I know many of you here in the room, but if I don't, I have been in education 25 years. I was a special education teacher for 10 years in Chicago Public Schools. I worked at the district level there. I also opened up a charter school in Chicago Public Schools. Then I got my degree to be a principal and started a charter school here in Milwaukee called Rocketship Southside Community Prep. It is a national charter network. After 2 years, we won a Beating the Odds award from then Superintendent Governor Evers. And from there, I was there for 10 years working for Rocketship. Then I worked at City Board Collective for over a year, and then I started an initiative called 95 Wisconsin. I know I have some supporters in the room of that initiative. I did not think I'd be running for state superintendent this time last year. I was working on starting 95 Wisconsin. So 95 Wisconsin stands for the fact that we know if children receive the right reading instruction using the science of reading, phonics in the early grades, we know that they can read well enough to go to college or get a career, 95%. So I started a program. We brought one-on-one tutoring that was working in Oakland that had been funded by Steph Curry. Their students were growing 2 years in 1 semester. And then I was doing the coaching, or I am doing the coaching, of school leaders and teachers in phonics. I'm working with 5 schools right now here in Milwaukee. So I was talking to, this is the story of how I got into this. I had been talking with DPI about this program and how we'd spread it throughout Wisconsin. That was the plan. And then I found out in August that the standards were lowered by the incumbent. And I didn't think that was the right thing to do. Only 3 in the state, only 3 out of 10 children are reading well enough to go to college or be career ready. 3 out of 10. And we know in Milwaukee Public Schools, it's 9%. And then for our Black children, it is only 5% are reading well enough. So when I heard that the standards were lowered, that had been set by Governor Evers, I do not think that was the right thing for our children. You can't make it look like they're prepared when they're not. So I actually went for a run when I heard about this, and it popped into my head back in August that I should run for state superintendent. And I've never run for a campaign, I've never worked on a campaign. I mean, I've volunteered, done some door knocking and things like that, but nothing like this. So I talked to some friends, some people were like, are you crazy? Like, you're gonna go up against the Democratic Party, there's all this stuff that's gonna be happening. But then others were like, you should do it for the kids. So, long story short, I am here now, I got through the primary. Thank you all who has got me signatures or voted. My whole platform is on restoring our high standards because our kids deserve so much better. To make sure we're refocusing on teaching reading, writing, and math so all kids can get a meaningful job, go to college, or master a trade. Making sure that we're partnering with our parents. Making sure the billions of dollars that is spent on education in the state is getting to the classroom and rewarding our great teachers and less bureaucracy. And then making sure the Department of Public Instruction is transparent, it's predictable, and innovative, so that we can have the best education system in the country and in the world, and having 95% of children who are reading well enough so they can get a job or go to college or master a trade. So I was asked, that's my platform, I was asked to talk a little bit about how I can help with Milwaukee Public Schools, Rachel. And so I will, if I get elected on April 1st, and then start in July, making sure that we have a office here in Milwaukee, so we are not only supporting, but also holding Milwaukee Public Schools, supporting and holding everyone accountable. We have to do something when only 5% of our children who are Black who are reading well enough, when they have all the potential in the world. So that is that is what I would do. I think being able to focus on early literacy. We have an Act 20, where we are, making sure, supposed to be making sure that schools are teaching phonics, they're using the science of reading. They have ails web testing, which is a reading test from kindergarten through 2nd grade. So we will have this information for families and for our schools. It's really supporting, I believe, being able to support MPS and making sure the teachers have what they need to be able to teach phonics and making sure our children can read. Okay. All right, so if you'd like to learn more about me, you can go to kinser4wikids.com. You can sign up for our newsletter or sign up to reach out to learn more. So thank you so much. Thank you for this opportunity.
Everybody. I'm Amy Lindner. My job today is just to welcome you to the Johnson Controls Volunteer Center. Welcome back to so many of you. We call it the Johnson Controls Volunteer Center because they gave us a lovely gift that allowed us to change this from a kidney dialysis center to what you see today, where so much good happens. So why volunteerism? We go to the next slide. Your teams, and so many of you already know this, but your teams love working for your companies. One of the reasons they do is because how well you engage them, both in their work and also in the community. Volunteerism is awesome for lots of reasons. You can read the bullets, you're smart people, but I want to show you this next slide, which is the GMC members whose teams have already engaged with United Way on volunteerism. There are a lot of incredible logos up there. Some of us have been deeply engaged, some not as much. Becky Rockwell's sign deserves to be much, much bigger for all the great ways they support our volunteerism all year. But if you're on this slide already, thank you, thank you, thank you. There is more space. We could do additional slides. We would love the opportunity to work with you. When I say opportunity to work with you on volunteerism, when we go to the next slide, there's lots of ways that we partner with companies. We hold lots of volunteer events here. We hold lots of volunteer events around the city, things like Project Homeless Connect, where we bring together hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in a one-time location to help people currently experiencing homelessness. We come to people's businesses and set up on-site and make it really easy for your teams to have really meaningful opportunities. We even do hybrid, virtual, remote, you name it, we do it, and it's this center that helps us do so much. So I know we have a really packed agenda, but we have one more slide. I think if you're like, wait, United Way does this? I would like to know more. Our website has a whole website, and it turns out you know somebody awesome who loves this stuff. You know me. So come find me, come to our website. Really, truly welcome. We're so glad all of you are here, and I'm looking forward to the program.
Thank you very much, Amy, and thanks for hosting here. Amy is part of the engagement committee of GMC members that have been working on the format of meetings, just everything about what we can do to make this as deep and meaningful for our members. And this is just another way that we can do it. I would note, for those of you who were here in January, we were like kitty corner at the Milwaukee Youth Arts Center. We're spending a lot of time in this neighborhood here, which is convenient, especially for the Miller Communications folks, Carl and James, who can just walk down the street, and a few others amongst us. But I can also say, I think there's probably about a 60-degree difference in where we are, maybe a 40-mile-an-hour wind difference where we were in January. I'm going to share a couple of strategic updates, and you're going to hear a little more from me today because I'm also going to talk about the operational review that was just completed for the Milwaukee Public Schools as well today, that we're going to have some reaction and response to that. But first I want to share a couple of updates on matters that we're working on some of our pillars regarding fiscal strength. Our committee met in late February with the city's innovation director, Jim Bowl, to kind of forge our path toward what progress we're going to make in 2025. You may recall we were able to work with the Johnson administration to help identify about $10 million in new revenue and efficiencies for the current budget year. We continue to work together in important ways. I think it's noted on the screen, all the members. You'll see one of those is David Gay, who's the co-chair. David's not here with us today because he opted instead to join a conversation with legislative leaders at the Milwaukee Metropolitan Association of Commerce today to talk to them about an important public safety fiscal responsibility issue that we're collaborating with the city on. Some of you may be aware of this, but as kind of an unintended consequence of Act 12, which was the state legislation that brought more resources to Milwaukee local units of government around the state, but also allowed the city and the county the opportunity to vote to increase local revenue through a sales tax. But one unintended consequence of that really kind of provides a disincentive for the city to pursue federal grants for additional cops on the street. That's a head scratcher, but we're working with the city to get that changed. David, in his role as our fiscal strength co-chair, is armed with information to make progress on that today. So he is going to have that conversation with the Speaker of the Assembly and the Senate Majority Leader. And while much of the focus that we have in 2025 and moving forward will continue to be internal with the city as we build on the long-term recommendations of the EY report, the fact that this is a budget year in Madison also means that we should and must articulate some of our shared priorities as fiscal decisions will be made that will affect the next 2 years. On the matter of infrastructure, many of the lakefront stakeholders and GMC members and staff gathered in February at the Milwaukee Art Museum to discuss access to the lakefront and how to bring additional continuity to really what is one of our greatest treasures. The city's moving forward on paving and sidewalk work on streets at the lakefront to the tune of about $16 million, which is going to assist in some pedestrian and access and safety. We continue to see creative ways to recreate those pedestrian bridges that once got over Michigan Street and Lincoln Memorial Drive, which would safely link the east side of downtown to the lakefront. We've had additional really exciting conversations regarding Lakeshore State Park, Veterans Park. We have momentum to continue to elevate the lakefront as an educational and recreational asset for our entire community. So we're going to reconvene that group in early April, and we'll keep you posted on those conversations. On April 2nd, we'll also host a virtual meeting to hear an update on the 794 project with Wisconsin Department of Transportation leaders. About 1 year after we discussed the options for 794 at a member meeting at Bright Height, we'll learn about the current process and how we can plug into the conversations taking place as we get closer to a decision on the future of this piece of freeway by the end of 2025. More information and registration for that meeting will be sent in the newsletter. On the issue of education and what we would, I guess, say is lifelong education, the Harvard Young American Leaders Program is a prestigious initiative, brings together rising leaders from 13 cities and diverse sectors to collaborate on solutions for our country's most pressing challenges. The program was started 10 years ago. I think Milwaukee this is our 7th year participating. I recently got the opportunity to discuss ways to enhance it and improve it with the leaders of the program from Harvard and peers from Columbus and Minneapolis. Yelp Milwaukee equips participants with insights from Harvard faculty, fosters cross-sector partnerships, and strengthens their ability to drive inclusive socioeconomic growth. The program builds a lasting network of Milwaukee change makers committed to shaping a more vibrant and equitable future for our city. I hope you'll join me in welcoming our talented 2025 cohort shown on the screen and a number who are also joining us today, and I welcome you to stand and be recognized. We expect big things. I think that was what that round of applause was. In a few weeks, we will host a virtual conversation to better understand the implications for early learning and early childhood education in the proposed state budget. We'll hear from Wisconsin Department of Children's and Family Secretary Jeff Pirtle at that meeting. The conversation will provide somewhat of a deep dive into the governor's budget proposals for early childhood education, examining their potential impact on businesses, workforce stability, and economic growth. We'll discuss what these initiatives mean for employers and their employees, how they affect the bottom line, and the key question, who will ultimately pay for them in the long run. Many of you work inside individual schools, and you and your organization support them with time, talent. Mayor, you're welcome to, usually I have people walking out when I'm speaking, but you walking in and take a seat and stuff like that, I will welcome. So many of you are in schools and work inside schools, but we also know that there are varying degrees of the depth of understanding that we all bring to the important issue of K-12 education. So today is really an exploration of the most current information, a reform outlook, based on the recently completed operational review of the Milwaukee Public Schools, then a conversation with journalists who spend more time inside schools and in conversation with leaders than most of the rest of us. So let's start with the operational review. I think I have can I move the slides? Yes, no? Yeah. It's moving? There we go. So just a little bit of background and context to start with. This is a slide that shows some of the stuff that's happened in the last year. But we all know, I guess we're all generally aware that in the city of Milwaukee, we educate about 110,000 students publicly and through public funding. About 60,000 of those, roughly, are in the Milwaukee Public Schools in about 136 schools. 15,000 of those are in about 25 public charter schools, and about 30,000 of those are in private, about 91 private schools around the city of Milwaukee. There's about 5,000 students who go outside the city with public schools as well. But this gives you just a notion of what's happened in the last year related to MPS. Just about a year ago, in the last spring election, we had a passage of $250 million referendum. Just weeks later, the revelations of some big reporting issues at MPS, and kind of, at the same time, potential loss of Head Start funds and state funds related to those financial reporting issues, while the Head Start funds were something different from the federal level. In May and June of 2024, and in fact, we had Governor Evers here at the beginning of June, just after he had announced 2 MPS audits that would be funded by the state. One, the operational review, what we're going to talk about today. The second, an instructional review that focuses on classroom instruction and outcomes. He found about $5 million of state money through federal channels, through the existing ARPA dollars, to pay for these things. That instructional review I'll talk a little bit about, but that's just getting underway right now. In June, we had the superintendent and CFO resignations and interim superintendent name. Some of us, it was kind of a flash in the pan, but there were efforts to recall several of the MPS board members last summer. They didn't end up getting enough signatures to get these on the ballot, but it was a reflection of kind of the challenges and the anger in places in the community. In the fall, the long-range facilities master plan was rolled out, at least the start of it, with suggestion and identification of about 13 to 15 schools, most of them on the north side, that could be closed based on several criteria that the consultants had laid out. In January, the NAEP scores revealed that Milwaukee continues to be very challenged amongst our peers around the country, and especially in the minority community, that we're doing embarrassingly poor. In February, lead paint was discovered in some Milwaukee schools. While we're in the neighborhood of Mayak, we're also in the neighborhood of Golda Meir School, which is one of the schools that was identified as having lead and needed to be cleaned up. Trowbridge is a Milwaukee public school that remains closed this week while there is cleanup that's underway there, and all the students there have been moved to a different campus. In March, there was ultimately resolution on the school resource officers, which I think have hampered a lot of the conversations with the state legislature over the last year. Brenda Casilius selected as the next MPS superintendent just within the last few weeks, and we're on the verge in April of 4 races for school board positions. Only 2 of those have any competition in them. Only 2 of those provide an option for the voters. So, this is what we have seen over the last year, and this is what we are at this point faced with. The challenges inside MPS, and these are ones that I think all of us could reflect on and we could note, but these were ones that the outside consultant that were brought in to do this operational review have really outlined as well. On the external side, 11% reduction in enrollment in just the last 6 years, but that follows a trend that's been ongoing for the last 30 years. At the same time, the city, just the demographics in the city are changing, and the number of young people in the city is down significantly from where it was just 2 decades ago. Certainly, Milwaukee is a hotbed of competition. There are challenges here around shortages for teachers. 80% of the students, no matter where they go to school in Milwaukee, are economically disadvantaged. Inside of MPS, about half of the students are noted as being chronically absent. In MPS, there's about a 76% graduation rate as opposed to a 94% statewide. And the average facilities inside MPS are, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 75 to 80 years old. So lots of those challenges. Internally, identified challenges, we all know this because we've lived here, the revolving door of superintendents over the years, and of cabinet level leaders, a culture of fear or resistance to change, ineffective reporting, and financial reporting challenges. And all of this kind of encapsulated in really what the consultants noted, and you'll see as I go through some of the other findings, a real lack of transparency and a fracture in the public trust. The process that the consultant followed. First of all, MGT is about a 1,000 person organization. They are based in Florida. It was created by a former Republican legislator in Florida, and they do this consulting around the country. They have very few employees in Florida. Most of their employees work remotely and do their work inside school districts around the country. And, you know, I mentioned earlier about the work that we did on the operational review for the city. The work that happened here and what MGT has done for MPS is similar to what we did in alignment with the city of Milwaukee and Ernst & Young about 2 years ago. It was an opportunity to throw everything on the table in terms of what the operations look like, find ways to operate more efficiently, find where there are challenges. A couple of ways that I think it's a little bit different is that this is not something that really came up from inside MPS. It was something that came from the outside and the governor, and while I think there was cooperation from inside MPS, I think there were, you know, we really worked hand in glove with the city when we were doing it. But it really is, the process is not dissimilar to what we did. Stakeholder engagement, they did about 18 interviews with various local and statewide players in the educational landscape. They did an analysis of a whole host of things, the organizational chart, strategic plan, the ongoing budgets. They researched and looked at best practices elsewhere around the country, comparing us to communities like Indianapolis, Baltimore, Cleveland, Philadelphia, Chicago, all places that MGT has also worked in. And then they brought their own findings that they have done from other of these projects around the country to look at how could that potentially be, could those things be adapted and put in place inside MPS. And so when they did that, they outlined really 3 goals that they came up with after doing all of this review. And I'll talk about them broadly here, and then we'll talk just a little bit more about them specifically. Number 1, create a coherent central system. And I think, you know, I think we can all kind of work on the presumption that if you're creating a coherent central system, you're doing one in absence of what exists now. And I think one of the reflections is that they're really, that they found that there just is not a lot of coherency in the way that we have been operating inside MPS for some period of time. The second one, foster meaningful communication, collaboration, really trying to build that sense of transparency. A number of us who have worked with MPS, and it's not as if you can work unsuccessfully within MPS, but there are those who have struggled to do that, and part of that reason oftentimes comes down to transparency and collaboration. Finally, to operate and fund strategically, make sure that those resources that are finite and scarce are wisely and appropriately used over the long term. Did I go back? Did I go too far? Sorry. So goal 1 on the creation of a coherent central system. There were 3 tactics that were put in place, first of all. One thing that they reflected on, if you looked at the report or even read some of the broad strokes of it, ambiguity of key entities inside MPS. There's an Office of Accountability and Efficiency, an Office of Board Governance, you've got the board, you've got leadership. There is a whole bunch of kind of incongruity in the way that those operate, and ambiguity over who's in charge of what is what the consultants came at. One example that was noted is there's a legislative policy manager, and that position has been shifted back and forth between the board and the district over time. You're not going to get continuity in terms of what you're voicing to the local community, what you're voicing to Madison, if you kind of have jobs being ping-ponged around inside the organization. There are separate communications roles for the Office of Board Governance and for the board that aren't always aligned in terms of how they're communicating inside the same building. So really the first tactic that was suggested here is restructuring the central office. They proposed, if you look at the report, they proposed a new organizational chart, provided examples from other communities because there hasn't been this very clear alignment in where everything is. Make some additional hires when you restructure that central office. Another area to focus that they particularly focused on was investing in human resources. Really looking at installing new HR leadership, finding ways to have outside support to do this. I think it was noted in the report that there are about 300 different job description documents that were inside MPS at any given time, and that's just not a way to look at operating efficiently. Shifting the strategic plan. There is a strategic plan that exists. There's also like 5 points that MPS uses as kind of their hallmark, but there is not continuity amongst those. So shifting those and explicitly linking those goals to outcomes, and really here honing in on specificity and accountability. One of the things that the consultant highlighted was that, and this happens in any organization likely, but that there are special projects that are oftentimes board driven, and that those special projects get the same amount of attention as those things that would have been staff or community driven. And so part of what the consultant suggested was that doing away or not having there be pet projects from board members is one area where Milwaukee can find some significant movement forward. And they also suggested a listening tour for the superintendent. I know she's eager to do that, but I also, having met with her and sat with her, and I think I can speak on behalf of the community, if that's the only thing of these 29 tactics that we do, Milwaukee will get nowhere. So and I'm not going to go through anything on here with much specificity, except just to say that these are several of the 29 different recommendations that are specific, and here they outline both a timeline for them, a priority, whether they're medium, high priority, a low or no budget option, and a high budget option for how you could do these things. One thing I would say, again, and I know a number of us have had conversations with the superintendent. She's out of town this week in the run-up to starting her job on March 15th, but she is actively recruiting. A lot of the stuff here when it comes to creating a coherent and central system is making sure that you have the right people around you. And I think she's using the context that she's had in a career that has taken her from Memphis to Minneapolis, St. Paul to Boston to try to find some of that talent to bring into Milwaukee, but also to integrate with some of the local talent as well. But I know that a big part of her focus has clearly been on her team and developing that team as she gets ready to take on the job. The second goal that they had was fostering meaningful communication, collaboration. Again, no surprise here when part of the challenge is outside transparency, that internal communication and collaboration are challenges as well. The collaboration between the board and the leadership. Again, the communication offices having been in different places, providing some of that board governance training around roles and responsibilities, things that, again, if you're a member of a nonprofit board, if you're a member of a corporate board, often you're doing this, and some of the time the leaders and the people inside the NPS board are doing it, but it's not cohesive and it's not always happening. Bolstering operations in the communications and marketing realm, and really one of the big areas, number 3 here, the data management and making sure that there is some unification around data sets. I'll go to the next one here. You'll see that about the 4th one down here, the create unified data sets to establish single sources of truth. I mean, that's kind of a nice way of saying that one arm doesn't know what the other arm is doing. The finance office at MPS collects from separate information on separate systems from payroll, HR, and facilities. And again, for any of you, whether you're involved in a corporation, a nonprofit, a higher education institution, the notion of one part of the organization not talking to another, just it makes that very difficult, and then it makes it more rife with personal error and the challenges that we all have if you just don't have the systems that have that continuity. The last goal that they outlined was operating and funding strategically. again, maintaining some accountability structures from the outside. Over the last year, there have been regular meetings with DPI almost on a weekly basis when MPS has been in crisis. The suggestion is that continuing some of that continuity over time is a good thing. There have been 2 corrective action plans that have been established with DPI and making sure that you continue to have that kind of accessibility and accountability. Again, here is that point number 2 that they continue to stress is investing in technology and infrastructure. The poor infrastructure and the lack of communication coordination is something that I think continues to hamper efforts inside MPS. And then redesigning some of the internal procedures that really is around the organizational culture. Again, it was noted that oftentimes there's a culture of fear, of lack of transparency, and so they made suggestions around reporting and how you would do some of that stuff. Again, here, and these, the 3 lists here that we provided, those I think total up to the 29 specific recommendations that came out of this report. The most expensive one that you see about halfway down the page here is invest in technology infrastructure. It really, it is throughout the report, and it is one area that, again, that it has been noted inside MPS and now from an outside consultant that it really is one of their big challenges. So I'm going to, did I go backwards? Oh, next steps here. I know, I'm sorry. I can't read very well without my glasses on. That way, but I can't read anything here with my glasses on. So now you know what it's like being old. Again, just to kind of wrap up what the MGT findings were. 1, a culture of resistance to change inside MPS, inconsistent data practices, lack of clear roles and responsibilities. A lot of that is what was in that report. Some parallels, as I mentioned, with the EY report that we did, but what are the next steps and who has a role to play in those next steps? And we'll hear more from that, or about that, as our guests come up after me. So you have Superintendent Brenda Casilius, and I would put the board in there as well. Dr. Casilius starts on March 15th. She has now a roadmap for operational progress and certainly a need for community involvement. And I think the board needs to be part of this as well. You know, I did read that it was hugely disappointing to read the board response to this consultant report. I think the first sentence of it said something to the effect of, it validates the progress we are making. And if you read the report, if you live in this community, I don't think that anyone in good conscience can say that we've made a heck of a lot of progress. So the board needs to be included in all of that. Governor Evers certainly still has a role to play in this. He put aside, as I said, $5 million at the outset of this for these 2 reports, the 2 audits. And I think all total, the 2 audits together are between $2 and $2.5 million. I think you'll hear in the next several weeks that there are resources that he may be able to bring and the state may be able to bring to start to do some of the work inside MPS. So hopefully with the superintendent and the board and the community, they can identify some of those quick things and make some of those investments where it's best utilized. MGI, the consultant, continues to play a role in Milwaukee. They were hired to do both the operational review and the instructional review. I had conversation last week with the people who are doing that instructional review. They will be in Milwaukee for about the next 2 months. They will be in about half of the MPS schools, so about 75 out of the 150 schools, looking at what's happening in the classroom and trying to provide some direct feedback on that. They expect that work will be done around Memorial Day. They will then share that with the state, and then it's the responsibility of the state to talk about that with the local community. The Wisconsin legislature certainly has a continuing role to play in this. The budget process is now underway. The governor has introduced his budget. There's a June 30th deadline to the fiscal year, and we'll continue to have conversations around there. And ultimately, you know, I put number 5. They probably should be number 1 in this, but parents, kids are certainly at the top of this list, and business and civic leadership. All of you who are already doing work in the schools and who want to have the kind of transparency, accountability, and the focus on outcomes for all kids in Milwaukee Public Schools. So that's where we are, and I think we all are kind of in this journey to try to figure out how do we ensure that the Milwaukee Public Schools and any school that's teaching kids in the city of Milwaukee can be the best partner that they can be. And I think that that's our general effort, that's our unified effort, and that's what we're going to continue to do. So that's going to end the presentation for me. And the next step in this is to have a little bit of a tables turning conversation. Oftentimes, and some of you probably have been interviewed by the journalists who are here today, but we now have the opportunity to ask them some questions. They spend a lot of time inside schools. They have made careers in terms of covering education here, and so they bring a somewhat unique perspective that they are willing to share with us today. One thing I want to report is I regret James Causey of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel had planned to join us. He became ill over the weekend and he's unable to join us today. I certainly still hope you'll take time to follow his reports, especially those that he does on NPS, as he's had a lifelong relationship to the district, including his graduation from Milwaukee Marshall High School, and his connections to schools, students, families, and their needs are real and deep. But today, we're going to be joined by local reporters who do have a deep understanding of Milwaukee's K-12 landscape. Alan Borsick, who's a senior fellow in law and public policy at Marquette University, and Corey Hess, who's a reporter with Wisconsin Public Radio. We're going to give them an opportunity to share their thoughts on how the educational landscape has evolved and their role in storytelling. And since you have already heard enough from me, their conversation will be curated by my colleague Langston Verdeen, who directs the GMC efforts around education in the community. Please welcome Langston, Alan, and Corey.
Hello. Press the button on the bottom to turn those on. Hey, everybody. Test, test, test. Test, test. How's yours?
I don't know.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Joel, for that introduction. Yeah, so I'm Langston Verdeen. I'm excited to lead this conversation. I have a history in education. I started my career right after graduating as a teacher. I got a chance to teach for 3 years, and so education is something I'm passionate about. I am a Milwaukee resident, joined by 2 Milwaukee residents, and folks who are passionate about education. And so, unlike many of you, this is our first time meeting in person. So I'm hoping that we can have a really robust conversation as 3 folks who just got a chance to kind of meet and get to know each other. So I'm going to dive right in just for the sake of allowing us to catch up on a little bit of time here. So Alan, you've spent years covering education, often asking a lot of the tough questions. How's it feel to be on the other side of that today?
I owe a lot to Milwaukee Public Schools because ever since the system started crashing a year ago, I've been doing a lot of TV and radio, so I'm more used to this role now.
What
Well, I prefer not to be on this side of it, so, but happy to be here today, so thank you for having me.
Fantastic. And, you know, each of you has reported on major education issues over the year. And so what's a story that you've covered that you feel best encapsulates the state of education in Milwaukee today?
I would say a story that's ongoing right now that sort of shows where Milwaukee Schools is the facilities planning that's underway. as Joel pointed out, you know, there are 149 schools in the district. Enrollment keeps going down, and the district just can't afford to keep all these schools open. And a lot of the schools that have seen the decline in enrollment are on the north side. And so once they decide which schools to close over the next year, many of them will be on the north side. But these school buildings are more than just places where kids get educated. These students have breakfast at the schools, they have lunch, they're kept safe in school, they're kept warm. And so unfortunately, you know, when these schools close in the neighborhoods, it's really going to affect these kids. And the kids are going to have to leave their neighborhoods, are going to just have to, families are going to have to figure out so much when these schools close. But it is a reality for Milwaukee Public Schools that they will have to close them. So I just think that whole issue sort of is, it just shows what is going on in the district for many reasons.
Alan, that conversation seems to be something that has come up quite a bit over the years. Is this something that just feels different this time around?
The building closing issue?
Yeah.
I don't really know. I think it's going to be very difficult to close schools. If you ask me what do I want to focus on the most, I'm not in a very good mood these days about these issues because I think they're bad. The state of kids in the city, the state of early childhood in the city. A couple years ago I said, I think I got one more crusade in me, I want to make it reading. So I've been writing quite a bit about reading the last several years, and the Journal Sentinel had several of their people join in on some of that. And then along came the NPS current crisis, which really is just a more vivid version of crises that have been there for years. So that I was trying to cut back on how much I'm writing for the Journal Sentinel these days. I don't work there. And that threw me back into it some, because I do think it's a really, really forefront issue for Milwaukee, as is the state of academic achievement and general achievement for kids not in the NPS system, which is not all that great either. I would throw out a couple words here about the report that Joel was talking about that strike me as kind of overriding the whole thing. One is incompetence. The incompetence in the system, and it's gotten worse over the years, is a crisis. I think Brenda Casilius knows this. I had a cup of coffee with her a couple weeks ago myself. And just to get more talented, better, competent people running the schools. I wrote a column for the paper about, 3 weeks ago, and in capital letters, I said the main question is, would you people get your act together? And I told Dr. Casilius, I said, by the way, that was not a facetious question. If she can do things that will convince the public to some degree that they're getting their act together, that would be a big step. That would be a really positive thing. And if I might add, the people in this room are many of the key business, civic, institutional leaders in town. I think that's an important role for you all to play, is to be strong advocates for them doing their business better. It's not only that report, by the way. A reporter at the Journal Sentinel named Rory Lennane had a big piece 2 or 3 weeks ago that she had spent like 6 months working on, which I really wish I had had that time in the past. The state of hiring, vacancies, and the incompetence, I really focused on that word these days, of the Human Relations Department, where there's been this carousel of leaders for years, and you say, they don't even know who's working for them. They can't get their act together. Get your act together. That's the subject I want to cover the most.
So Corey, sticking with the independent review, did anything surprise you, or was it a confirmation of those long-standing problems that you've been writing about?
I think it was a confirmation. I mean, the overall report basically said that the central office is not equipped to adequately serve students, and I don't think anyone was surprised to hear that, given what we've witnessed. Were you surprised? Were you surprised?
No, I thought it was a good report. I wish I'd written it. I thought it was really thorough and well documented.
But the three goals, I mean, let's come up with a coherent system, let's have more communication and collaboration, and let's fix some of these bigger financial problems, and also, let's make sure that our computer system can talk to DPI. I mean, really? We can't do that? Those seem like no-brainers, but how are they even going to do that? I mean, they seem like things like, of course, we need to do this, but right now it just seems like such a big task. And as Joel pointed out, the governor has some money allocated. There's $3 million that's there now that can be spent. He is proposing in his budget another $5 million. That money will only be given to MPS if the school district starts to make progress. But I mean, it's going to take money, it's going to take buy-in, it's going to take, this new superintendent who brings in the right people and just a lot of dedication. I mean, the report is really good, but now it needs to be acted upon.
So, given those financial issues, some of the leadership challenges and changes, what are some of the immediate next steps, and who needs to step up? And maybe, Corey, let's start with you.
Well, I mean, the first thing is transparency. Nobody knows what's really going on over there, and taxpayers don't know. I felt like when the referendum was going to be passed, we couldn't really get a clear answer about what that money was going to be used for. I mean, we couldn't get just a clear answer. And then just that kind of transparency. I think having a new superintendent who has not been in MPS for their career is a good first step. I think, that's a good step.
Alan?
Who needs to step up? Well, frankly, everybody. There's a gentleman sitting in front of me about 15 feet from me named Howard Fuller. And as he has said, probably 5,300 times, maybe just today, if we really cared, we'd find solutions. If we thought these kids were important, we'd find solutions. I started covering the gaps in Milwaukee, especially between black and white kids. And I think it was 2004. It was the first time I sat down with the NAEP results, the National Assessment Results. And at that time, not very much on computers. And I went down by hand on a list of states by disaggregated data by race. And I said, boy, that Wisconsin gap is huge. And then I went all the way down the list. It was the largest. And not only was it the largest, the scores for black kids, the objective scores, were the worst in the country, worse than Louisiana, worse than Mississippi, worse than the District of Columbia. That was 21 years ago. Guess what? It hasn't changed. It hasn't changed because we haven't done enough. If you believe it can get better, and I do, then you gotta say, we gotta do better. And that would apply to everybody. Frankly, I say this with great respect for the mayor of Milwaukee, who's sitting here. Show me a city where there's been action around change, and I'll show you a really involved education there, even if he doesn't have direct control of the school district. I'll show you civic leaders. I'll show you education. And not to say nothing good is going on. MQ, the things going on that are really noble efforts. But it's not enough because the numbers aren't moving. Show me the results. Show me the results on attendance. Show me the results on early childhood outcomes for kids. Show me the results on reading. Did I mention reading? And then there's reading. MPS is actually doing okay on reading. They've got a curriculum that's approved by the current Act 20 law. They're training teachers. But it's kind of frankly half-hearted. We need a full-hearted effort. We need, I went the other day, I was just talking to Joanne Anton, I went the other day to a Barbie school on the north side, north of Capitol Drive on Titania, where they have a program called Forward Scholars, volunteer program, and they were doing excellent work. I was really impressed. I'm going to write a piece about them soon, I hope. But it's such a small number of kids. And I discussed that with the woman who's leaving. How do we get to all these kids? Well, we can if we set out to do that.
Yeah, that's great.
I talked to you.
Now there's a lot of great pockets of great work going on here. Leading some of the education subcommittee work, I get to meet a lot of folks who are doing a lot of really dynamic work in here. So just to pivot a little bit, Corey, this one's for you. In covering education, do you feel that the media drives change, or do you feel like important stories don't break through into the public or to policymakers?
I think sometimes stories break through, sometimes they can drive change, but honestly, I think some of the important stories in education don't resonate with, not with policymakers or with, people in this room, but with the general public. I don't really think that there's an appetite for those kind of stories. There's really important stories in education. There's more money needed for special education funding. There's more, more attention needs to be paid for teacher retention programs. There's stuff like that, and the public, I don't think, is genuinely interested in that. There seems to be a big appetite for stories about culture war stuff. People like that. They like more sensational education stories, unfortunately. And so it has been hard in the last year to strike a balance of what to cover and, to make sure that we're doing it right and to make sure that we're covering the really important issues in education, but also, kind of the other things going on that people read.
I don't want to dive into that too much. On the whole, media coverage of education issues is not as strong as it used to be. There's just not as many people as it used to be. I can tell you that the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel 20 years ago had 7 full-time education reporters. I was one of them. And I don't even know quite how to count it now. Maybe it's 2, and some of that's part-timers. So you're just not going to get the same focus. A lot of the education stuff, the irony, and as Corey was saying, the more important it actually is, the less likely it is to get what we call clicks these days. And so much is driven by clicks. This drives me crazy. I'm from the days of the dinosaurs when it comes to media coverage. That said, some good things have been happening. A couple particular TV reporters in town, and I've told them this personally, I think have been really focused on some of the problems in MPS, particularly the financial problems, and that's help. It does need a spotlight, and they're the spotlight. I've been telling people, not in this setting alone, and not, I don't think ever in her presence, but I think Corey has the best job covering education in Wisconsin right at the moment. So there are bright spots, but it's not like it's not like it used to be, and that's a problem.
And I appreciate that. And so this next one is for you, Alan. So given everything that you've seen in your reporting over the last 30 plus years, do you think MPS is at risk of state intervention or further enrollment decline or even more radical restructuring?
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe a lot of the restructuring ideas, break up the district, turn it over to the mayor. I think that those things need to be very carefully examined because some of them aren't really very practical. If you like one school board, you really like 8. And the same is true with mayoral control. Nationwide, it has some places where it's been pretty good and where it hasn't. Is the school board, as we know it, the group you might pick to run a $1 billion plus operation that is engaged in Milwaukee's most important pursuit? Frankly, no. And I predict it's going to get worse because some of the best people on the board currently are the ones who are leaving in this election. And the 3 new seats and 1 almost new seat are people with very little experience at this. This is not personal to them, because I really don't even want them at all. It's going to be a very inexperienced board. The fact that 5 people ran for 4 seats and there's only one contested race on the southwest side is a statement about the torpor around the subject, the lack of energy. So, yeah, something needs to be done about the school board, frankly. What is MPS at risk of? Collapse. And at that point, you know whose job it is? It's not Mayor Johnson's. Education is a state responsibility under the state constitution. If I were sitting in Madison, not only the governor, but the legislative leaders, the Republicans, both parties, I'd be sitting there saying, we better be thinking smart, hard, and bold about what to do about this, because otherwise it's going to end up in our lap, and it ain't going to be free.
And so this one is for both of you, or either one of you want to jump in. If there's an underreported issue in education that we all should be paying attention to, what would you point us to?
I would say math. We talk a lot about reading, and we should be talking about reading. But I think math scores, they're worse. The kids in MPS are doing worse in math than they are in reading, and when you look across the state, math, they're not doing well in math either. I have talked to some state legislators about whether they would try to bring a bill forward with math, and they said no. They said that the whole thing with Act 20, the political fighting that's gone on, by the way, the $50 million that was set aside for the Act 20 funding will probably go back into the general fund because they can't get it straight, so that'll just go right back at the end of June. But they just said no, they're probably not going to do anything with math. Another thing is no other state has really tackled math, so with the reading legislation, they have said that there's been blueprints to follow, and they have told me that they haven't really seen anyone else jump forward with math. But the thing is that if you look at the US compared to other countries, we're just so far behind in math. And I think that that's something that nobody pays that much attention to, because it's kind of like, oh, you don't know math? Nobody knows math. But if you don't know how to read, that's terrible, obviously. But if you don't know math, everyone's like, no one knows it. But I think it's a problem.
That's a good choice, and I agree with everything Corey said, but my own answer would be early childhood. That it gets too little attention. The gaps that are there in Milwaukee when kids walk into 5-year-old kindergarten are clear, huge, and unchanging. And they're almost the same as the gaps that are there at the end of 12th grade. In reality, the school system does a fairly good job of not making the gaps worse, and does a terrible job of closing the gaps. But what if everyone who walked into kindergarten was ready for kindergarten? There have been some good efforts in town, and people in this room who are heroes on this subject, but the same thing, it's not proportional to the problem. If you've got next door, you've got the COA, you've got the UCC, you've got Milwaukee Succeeds, trying to advocate. You say, hey, this is good, these are steps in the right direction, but we need so much more. And at the same time, I would say we're not really going to solve this problem until people who work in early childhood programs are paid at least equal to dog walkers, which they're not.
So our new MPS superintendent has a 2-year contract, and I hope we all here want to see her succeed. I'm an alumnus of MPS, I do, for sure. If you were to write a story in 2 years and it's a story of success, what has to happen differently so that you can write that story of success?
Well, I go back to some clear indicators that they're getting their act together. That's one. Now, if they're over here, they're not going to get to here in 2 years. Maybe they're not going to get to here ever. Urban education problems are endemic nationwide, but there are places doing better than Milwaukee. In fact, according to the NAEP so-called TUDA studies, most every urban area in the nation is doing better than Milwaukee, although many of them have lower childhood poverty rates. But in any case, you're not going to get from here to here. How about if we got from here to here? How about if we got there and then got to here? Some signs of progress. Signs in test scores, signs in attendance, signs in graduation. Just even intangible signs. We're getting our act together.
I was just going to bring up attendance and graduation rates. Last week, I did a story about the state putting out something that graduation rates are better than they've been in years. They said we've got the best graduation rates we've had in a decade. But then when you look closer, it's dependent on race and location. So yes, overall, graduation rates are the best they've been. But not here, not in Milwaukee. And then same thing, students, about almost half of kids here are chronically absent. So, I mean, you can't succeed in school if you're not in school. So I think if that can improve in 2 years, then she's successful.
Great. So what we're going to do now, we're going to turn it over to our members for a brief Q&A session. I will ask that we save this time for our members, and what I mean by that is I would like our guests, as much as we honor and appreciate you all being here, just take a moment to allow our members to ask our questions, because we have a limited amount of time. Do we have an extra mic, or do we need to use this one? All right, so with that, if you do have a question, pop your hand up. Heather's gonna come around.
Can I put in one plug? This is really out of character for me, at least I think it is, to promote my own stuff. But on your tables, there's several copies of the current Marquette Law School magazine, which is what my real job is working on that magazine. And that is, by the way, not Mike Pence on the cover. I think it's better. It looks like it's a law school graduate who's a major executive at the Atlanta Braves who I did a profile. But what is in there is a large forum on why don't things get better, a piece that I wrote on one of my crappy days. And then we got reactions from 6 people, including Dr. Howard Fuller. And frankly, it's one of the pieces that I'm hoping is worth reading. So feel free to take those, and if we run out of them, let me know and I'll get more. Not at the moment, but we're eager to distribute those.
So Alan, I have a question for you, which is the nature and pace of change, and being willing to be a change leader. A lot of people in this room have worked with MPS in a lot of different ways. And one of the frustrations is that no matter how effective and how good these efforts are, you're dealing with an organization that is resistant to change, and because of fear. Jackie Herbarber did a marvelous job when COVID came of getting computers into school from volunteers, and it took MPS 12 weeks to get it. Something that the private sector could do and did do in 2 weeks. What I want to know is who can put their thumb on the scale to say change is okay, and if you don't change, you're going to be accountable.
Well, that would be one of the things for the new superintendent. Yes, one of my snarky comments about MPS for years is that they make it so hard to love them. People who really, really wanted to help, been willing to help, have resources to help, have oftentimes found it so frustrating. It's actually gotten worse in the last 15 years. The system's become more bunkered and more closed. From a reporting standpoint, you could ask anyone who's covered NPS in the last 15 years, and they'd say it is impossible. You can't get an answer out of them. You can't get to the right people. They won't let you talk to principals. They won't let you talk to lower administrators. You can't get into schools. Open the doors. I think Dr. Casilius understands this and wants to move in that direction. But that sense of we're here for change, that is one thing that really does lean on the superintendent. One of the runners-up for superintendent, one of the 3 finalists, was a guy named Joshua Starr, who's been superintendent in Montgomery County, where I was, suburban Washington. Very large district, much larger than NPS. Really smart guy. And he said in his presentation, I've read your budget, I looked at your organizational chart, I don't understand how this district is run. I'm going to change that. I think that's one of the reasons the board didn't hire him. But that's something the superintendent.
So I've been at this, as many people in this room have been for many decades now, and those of us in the civic sector have been talking about governance change ever since I've been in Milwaukee, 30 years. Do you sense from a reporter's perspective that there's somehow more appetite for that? Because there's always been a lot of fear for lots of different reasons. But is it loosening up a bit? Are people seem to be more comfortable with the idea, or are we still stuck and there's just too much fear around that?
I was afraid you were going to ask me why I wore a tie.
Not my fault.
No, it's definitely not Dan Bader's fault. I think there's more frustration in general. I think the way things played out last spring with the referendum was very interesting and had important lessons. The referendum barely passed. And if the mess in the finance department had come out ahead of that vote, I think it would have gotten clobbered. And people remember that, and they know their property tax bills. So I think there's more appetite for, hey, let's do something about it. Whether that carries over to governance change, I don't really know. And the union is still the union, to be honest. They still have quite a bit of power in the system. They have quite a bit of power with the school board. You're going to get into, dare I say, racial politics, which is what happened in 2009 and 10 when Jim Doyle and Tom Barrett floated this very tepid and poorly run initiative to go to what was sort of a mayoral control system. But I think the frustration of that, the desire for change, is much sharper than it used to be.
No, I agree. I think that, like you said, there's a lot of frustration, but I don't think that the appetite is here in the city for. I asked the mayor, who was here not that long ago, if there's an appetite. You didn't think so. To put you on the spot. I don't think that there's an appetite in the city yet for that.
All right, with that, we are at our time for this portion of the conversation. So I want to thank you both for this panel discussion. Really appreciate it. Great to get to know you both a little more. So thank you. And I will turn it over to Ray Hill, who is Executive Director of the King Drive Business Improvement District.
Good afternoon, everyone. slightly change in momentum here. So my name is Ray Hill. I have the opportunity to serve as the Executive Director of the historic King Drive Business Improvement District number 8. We are one of 33 bids and bids in the city of Milwaukee, obviously very active. But just wanted to welcome you all to the district. I know last meeting you guys were at MIAC, which is in the bid, and then before that you were at Ryan Lawn, which is also in the bid. So I thought I would come and say hello and welcome you officially, and also just share a couple of facts about the commercial corridor. So we are 4.5 miles in length, so we are one of the largest bids in geography here in the city of Milwaukee. Also, fun fact, there is, we are the #1 in the country per capita for bids, so that's something to be proud about. So we really are intentional around wrapping small businesses and property owners in revitalization. We are 62 blocks long. We have about 4,000 employees in the district, a little under 700 small businesses in this corridor, 20 restaurants and 69 retailers. Specifically for the bid, we have, with help of our partners such as LISC Milwaukee and the City of Milwaukee, we've invested about $1 million between infrastructure improvements as well as operational capital for businesses. If you'd like to find out more information, please visit our website or connect with me. I would love to talk about further collaborations. I also want to say we are home to the district of Bronzeville. You are slightly east of Bronzeville right now, but if you go right over to King Drive and head west to Walnut all the way to Burleigh now, you're in Bronzeville. Bronzeville has been featured in the New York Times as one of the 52 places for a changed world, and also National Geographic on the preservation of the history of Black neighborhoods. So that's something to celebrate. So I thank Joel and the GMC for allowing me the time in 5 minutes. I'm standing between you and your afternoon, so thank you so much.
Well, thanks everyone who participated in today's conversation around K-12 education in Milwaukee. It was interesting to hear from the local media on a deeper level. They've spent years researching and analyzing the many facets of how we've arrived to where we are today. Education is a foundational element of creating a pathway to a successful future. If you're interested in participating on our education committee, you can contact Joel or Langston Verdeen. Our next meeting is April 14th, Milwaukee Day. We'll celebrate Milwaukee with historian John Gerda at the historic Rockwell Automation. Thank you, Becky House, for hosting. And before we adjourn, we do have a giveaway. We're back in the King Drive Business Improvement District today. I'd like to showcase a local business. To emphasize the importance of education, we have a $50 gift card for the Niche Book Bar. One person will receive a gift card, and the winner is Miriam Rosenzweig. This meeting is officially adjourned. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.